Hello, my name is Patrick Killeen. I am the unit chief of the FBI's International Corruption Unit, International Corruption Program overall. I am lucky enough to have been invited to speak to everyone today on a very important topic, a topic that I, of course, myself have invested a lot in, but also the U.S. government has assessed a lot in. In fact, fighting corruption has become one of the primary national security priorities of the United States at this time. So I'm going to speak to you for the next 25 minutes. I have a quick presentation to go along with the words I'm going to give you. And let me share my screen and we can get started right now. So the general title of this presentation is FBI Investigations of International Corruption, but I'm going to provide you some specifics, one relating to our program, but also related to the various aspects of the current environment, the future of investigating international corruption, but also I will add in various parts on how this affects the Caribbean region. So I will talk about primarily the international program to give a general sense of what the FBI's program's structure is, but also to give you some context of what the capabilities and the resources that the FBI has. Then I'm going to talk about international corruption's current environment. The environment related to international corruption is constantly evolving. Very often, it will be at the forefront related to technology, regulation, and various other matters. So the investigators and regulators are constantly working to keep up with the pace, keep up with new trends. And then I'm going to present to you the investigative strategies of my program, what we're trying to do as we go forward in the fight against corruption. To give you some perspective, the FBI's International Corruption Program essentially covers the world in regards to criminal acts that can be prosecuted through the U.S. Legal system, but also how we work with our international partners to fight corruption in their areas of responsibility. And so we're constantly working together, assisting, leveraging, using each other's resources to make a successful, basically, overall world fight against corruption. So the International Corruption Unit, ICU, has primarily a headquarters function and then what I'll call a field function. Headquarters is obviously located right there in Washington, D.C. I myself am the unit chief. We currently have 5 supervisory special agents, 4 management and program analysts. That position essentially is, I would say, administrative and operational support. They provide us, whether it's investigative, logistical, and the various other matters. They're the ones that assist the program overall. We do have 1 intelligence analyst assigned to us who goes over all the intelligence related to the international corruption program at the FBI, disseminates that both internally to the other FBI programs, but also externally to our U.S. government partners. And we also have a tactical specialist to help exploit evidence that we obtain during the course of our investigations. As I said, there's a second component of the International Corruption Program, and that relates to what I will call the field. Primarily, that is made up of our squads. Those are basically investigative groups that are placed out in the field, out in FBI field offices in the United States. We have 4 of them. We have a squad in Los Angeles, a squad in New York, a squad in Miami, and a squad here in Washington, D.C. Now, along with their investigations that relate to those areas of the United States, each of those squads has an area of responsibility. That will include, for Los Angeles, Asia, and Australia. New York has primary responsibility over matters that tie to Africa or Western Europe. Washington is Eastern Europe, Middle East, and Eurasia. But most importantly for this audience, our squad in Miami, Florida, has investigative responsibilities of Central and South America. But what is included in that is the Caribbean. Numerous cases that we've had in the past have tied to nations in the Caribbean area of the world. So we place a great deal of importance on that area of the world. Our Miami squad has 10 agents, and most of them are fluently speaking in languages that are often spoken in there, including French and Spanish, as well as obviously English. So the Miami squad, in relation to all Caribbean corruption cases, Miami would have the primary responsibility. In addition to the domestically placed individuals, the FBI's International Corruption Program has multiple people staffed internationally. We are an international program, and we can't be everywhere at once. While we do travel a lot and work with our foreign partners, we do find it best to have people who are in our program who actually sit overseas. First off, we have what we call transnational anti-corruption program advisors. These individuals are placed around the world, and what they do is they work with anti-corruption agencies in various areas around where they're placed to both help build the capacity of anti-corruption agencies, but also to assist with their cases. And if those agencies have cases that refer to the United States, whether through American citizens, American companies, or even US dollars traveling through, we assist those, and very often we open up a parallel case. Another individual that we have is in London, and that individual is our liaison to the International Anti-Corruption Coordination Center. Quick background, the International Anti-Corruption Coordination Center, or the IACCC, is an organization that assists developing countries with anti-corruption efforts. Various members of the IACCC, when they receive a request from a country regarding a potential corruption matter, take the request, and all members of the IACCC will check their own databases for any relevant information for that country to assist in their investigation. The IACCC also provides training. Examples other than the United States, members of the IACCC are the United Kingdom, Canada, Singapore, Australia, and New Zealand. There are also multiple associate members, including maybe the former British, I would say British Islands, many of which are in the Caribbean. And we also will have what we call TDYs, or temporary deployments. Those are individuals who we place in jurisdictions that are targeted specifically related to anti-corruption efforts, whether it's a large case or basically working with a particular anti-corruption agency on ongoing cases or actual building of the agency. You can see some of the locations there. Those are constantly changing. Very often we might move someone from one city to the next. So that is a very fluid situation. Well, what's the current environment of international corruption? Well, as opposed to what many consider to be in their view, what international corruption is, bribery, basically cash being handed over in exchange for a favor. That is still happening, but it has become much more sophisticated. And through that, primarily, is the increase in the sophistication of money laundering tied to the corruption. That could be anything related to either bribes. It could be related to the theft of state funds by corrupt government officials, and often it includes the work of middle facilitators, as we will say. Those are professional money launderers. And what do those professional money launderers do? They have very sophisticated enterprise methods of laundering funds. That recently we've seen a very large increase in the use of virtual assets. Obviously, cryptocurrency or virtual assets, whichever you choose to call it, have at least an aura of the ability to conceal funds or make them hard to trace from one point to the other. We have various tools at the FBI which we lend to our partners who may not have the same capabilities. in order to help them do trace assets, because in the end, they are not completely untraceable. Sophisticated money laundering also exploits global banking systems. And what does that mean? Well, that means basically currencies beyond just one currency. I use the examples here of the dollar, the euro, the British pound sterling, and even the Chinese yen. That Japanese yen. What that really does is create the ability by these money launderers to receive money in one currency and pay and convert it to nothing for convert it to another currency in order to complete a bribe, complete the theft of funds. Very often, especially related to kleptocracy matters, or what we would just call simply basically theft of state funds from political figures and their associates. Funds are moved out of the particular country that they're stolen from and placed in outside jurisdictions. And they're very often stolen in one currency and converted to another. And this is why we're finding more and more sophisticated money laundering tied to foreign bribery. Also, what we're also seeing a large increase in corruption tied to the malign influence of state actors. Now, what do I mean about that? Without naming any particular countries, what very often happens is foreign countries try to gain influence in other jurisdictions. And one of the ways they attempt to gain that influence is through corrupt matters. Now, that could be through just straight on payments to public officials, but very often it's done under the guise of other methods. One particular example that I cite right here is infrastructure assistance projects. The assistance is provided under the basically under the view of, well, we are just coming to this country to help them build a railroad, or build a port, build a airport. And on its face, that is a very noble and a very what I would say a legitimate endeavor. But very often this is done in relation to corruption, whether it's just to gain the influence and control somewhat over another jurisdiction that maybe have a strategic value, or specifically have a resource for another country, whether that could be a natural resource, that could be a geographic strategic location where it's placed. The Caribbean is a very strategic place for many countries in relation to its proximity to notable countries, particularly the United States, but also Canada, Central and South America. So that's an example. What we often see are state actors who come in under the guise of, well, we're going to possibly provide you with a large, usually badly needed infrastructure project, but that will be in exchange for access to a natural resource, or that'll be exchanged to the allowance of maybe, who knows, having a military base. And what happens with this is very often there's corruption related to that. Political officials could be basically compensated under the books in order to make this a reality. So we're seeing an increased amount of basically corruption related to state actors, particularly countries. And finally, and this is has come into the presence and come into more prominence in the past year, is the sanctioning of individuals and entities by the U.S., by the European Union, by the United Kingdom, by various associations in countries and or regional concerns. I'm use the example right there of Task Force Kleptocapture. That was formed by the United States Department of Justice shortly after the invasion of Ukraine by Russia. And what that did is that would increase the focus and the number of sanctions placed on certain individuals tied to the Russian government, and particularly tied to the Russian government and the military apparatus. U.S. sanctions are imposed. Very often, sanctions are also imposed on corrupt individuals. The corruption could be related to South America. It could be related to the Caribbean. If you had a corrupt governmental officer in the Caribbean, and the United States had enough evidence to prove that they are, well, the United States may sanction that individual or even members of that individual's family who we believe may possibly be involved in the hiding or the transfer of stolen funds. So there has been a very large increase in sanctioning, especially in the past year. But what I would also say is there's also an increased focus on U.S. investigative agencies and prosecutors to go after individuals who try to evade sanctions. They may be a sanctioned entity, but what they try to do is disguise their assets, try to move their assets from their ownership to another entity's. There's been an increase in prosecution by U.S. authorities related to individuals and entities that try to evade sanctions. And I would say that trend is probably going to continue to increase. I do not see that evening off or even being reduced. It has proven to be an effective tool. And again, particularly, and a good example is related to what's going on in Ukraine, but also it can happen both to corrupt officials, even to officials related to war crimes. Those individuals can be sanctioned. And very often what happens is there's evasion, but there's also corruption tied to that. So that is I would say, has become a very significant part of our investigations. Well, what are our FBI investigative strategies going forward? Well, the FBI knows that we cannot do anything on our own. We need to work with our partners. Corruption could occur in the United States, but the money may go to another country. Corruption may occur in one particular country, but usually the funds, the stolen assets, the stolen money is going to end up in a separate country. And the U.S. resources and the access of the FBI, the United States Department of Justice, they only go so far. Well, the way we are able to counteract that limitation is by working with our partner agencies. And we not only working with them to introduce ourselves to them, but and basically to describe what we have, similar to what I'm doing to you right now, what we have in resources and abilities and our focus, but also to learn what our partners' focuses are, what our partners' access is. And very often what we do is we work very closely to form a memorandum of understanding or some type of agreement in order to really facilitate and make working together to fight corruption a more efficient matter, which has become incredibly useful. We often, particularly about the Caribbean, we have numerous what we call FBI Legat offices. Those are offices placed in various countries that usually cover more than one country, but through our FBI legal attaché offices in those international locations, we make connections, we make contact with anti-corruption authorities, whether it's just about a particular case, or it could be about helping out with training. Virtual assets, cryptocurrency training is one of our number one requested items from our partner agencies, including in the Caribbean. Often we work with certain countries, and not only do we work with them on potential corruption related to prior political leaders who stole from those countries. An important thing is we work together to both investigate that case, prosecute that case, bring justice to the people who are involved, but also to freeze and seize and then eventually forfeit ill-gotten gains, assets. It could be money, it could be physical items like a boat or real estate. And what the United States does in that situation is once those are forfeited, we return the funds related to corruption back to the victim country. So that is a big thing we do. But what we have to do in regards to that is we have to work with our partner agencies. So we, maximize the amount of the investigations, the potential criminal violations, but we can also help identify actual assets, gain access to witnesses. So working with our partners is an integral part of what we do. What we're also going to do is continuing to increase our expertise in the laundering of illicit funds, including virtual assets. I've already said it once before. We have seen an increased amount of activity related to cryptocurrencies, virtual assets, And the FBI knows that we are not at a point now where we believe we are truly experts. We are truly to the point where we feel comfortable with our knowledge. We have a virtual asset unit that helps both the FBI. But one point to make is very often we employ the assistance of our virtual assets unit when we work with our partners who may not have the same access or the same resources. So that is a benefit of working with us. We also are focusing on the evolving and usually I would say increasing in complexity of laundering of illicit funds, both to prove our investigative case, but again, to find out where there are assets to recover for the victim countries. And those are that is the number one priority of the FBI. And one thing we also know is, along with working with our with our public partners and various governmental entities, we need to work with our private side friends. Very often, these are banks. They could be trade associations. They could be particular business associations. We know that they have information related to corruption, and they have access that we don't, and so many of our partner agencies don't. To continue on that, we also are very often working with whistleblowers and cooperating subjects. These are individuals that are either contact us directly or they contact our partners in various countries to come forward to report corruption. That's usually what falls under the heading of whistleblower. Very often we may catch an individual with information who is involved in corruption, and after being arrested and placed in a situation where they know they are in serious trouble, very often those individuals will cooperate with us and our partners to provide further information to advance our investigations and again bring justice and seize and forfeit assets. So those are three of the main things that we focus on in the FBI's international corruption program. We know that we can't do this alone. So I wanted to give you, before I end, a little background on our targeted regions and countries. These factors usually figure into why we would target a certain country for our focus, because the world is a very large place and we don't have a lot of time. We don't have enough time and resources to focus on everything. So what do? Well, we look at regions and countries that have historical legacy of corruption. This could be various parts of the world. It could be parts of the Caribbean. It could be parts of South America, Africa. Through our analysis and working with our partners and other agencies, we are able to figure this out. Also, there's strategic areas that are tied to corruption. Resources is a big one. Unfortunately, natural resources can make a country rich, but usually, very often, corruption affects the ability of the fruits of those resources to really be shared amongst the various the citizenry of those countries. And finally, we're looking for where malign influence is increased. Again, we're talking about strategic locations around the world, which often plays up to the previous category of strategic areas. Foreign actors are often going to focus on where they get the most strategic value. And very often what follows soon after is corruption. So what are some of the places that we focus on? Well, we focused on Central America, the Northern Triangle in particular. Our administration has placed a high level of focus on that. Well, another place is the parts of Africa that have a high amount of strategic natural resources, including Nigeria, the Democratic Republic of Congo, which have vast amounts of natural resources that most developed countries and even most, I would say, companies are focused on, and very often are focused to gain influence. The Caribbean, for various reasons, for its strategic location, for its resources, has become a large focus of our FBI investigative program. And then finally, what we do focus on is international financial centers. This could include Panama, the United Arab Emirates, and Singapore, because money tied to corruption usually goes through these financial centers. So we work with partners in those countries, but also gain as much intelligence and experience and information related to those. So that concludes the